Good morning, my friends. How are you today? It's Sue from Sue Pellin Designs, and today we are going to play with rotary cut applique. Once again, I love teaching people how to applique and doing that in a more fun and easy way. So all of our applique is fused and rotary cut. So today we're going to dive into some topics that I've been dying to talk to you about. And we're going to be playing with a new critter today for our applique critter series. Now, many of you who have been following me for a while, you know that I am a bird lover and I love to feed my birds. In fact, in my newsletter last week, I talked about my bird feeders and the constant problem with squirrels. So today we're going to attempt to make a squirrel because squirrels have been such a big part of my life this year, combating them from eating all the bird seed, that I want to commemorate that trial in my quilt this year. And the quilt that I'm making this year is a Baltimore album quilt. So our members of Ahead of the Curve have been making Baltimore album blocks along with me all year long. We've been making up to 16 different applique blocks for our Baltimore album quilts. And we've been trying to make them in two different versions. We've been doing a plain version and a fancy version. So what is Ahead of the Curve? That's our membership where people come, spend time with me, playing with applique every month so that you can perfect your applique skills. So welcome everybody. I'm so glad that you're here. Today we're going to dive into some applique techniques that might be new to you, or maybe you have tried these applique techniques before. Now, let me double check and make sure that we are live with our, making sure that everybody can hear me. Give me a big thumbs up. Kathy from Ohio and Elaine, give me a big thumbs up. And good morning from Ohio and from Mississauga, Ontario, Canada. Well, you'll notice behind me, I have two. Oh, welcome, Eileen. Nice to see you. I'm guessing everybody can hear me since you are all starting to comment, and there's no bad comments out there about my microphone this time. Okay, you will notice that behind me there are two different applique quilts. One of them is the same shape repeated over and over and over and over again. Lori just popped on, and Lori has just also finished her temperature quilt. And Lori, yours looks pretty much like mine because it's all the same block over and over again. The fun with a temperature quilt is picking the colors that represent the temperatures in your area and creating a beautiful quilt where you can trace back and find the temperatures for each day of the year. This one over here, this was 2022. And in 2022, I lost my dad. So that's also commemorated on this temperature quilt. Right above my head there, you see a green plaid set of leaves. That's the day that my dad passed away. So happy memories, sad memories, a year to remember what our life was like up here in Upton, Massachusetts. We had cold temperatures in the wintertime, hot temperatures in the summertime, and all of that is traced on that quilt using the cherry wood fabrics. So why is that quilt hanging behind me when it was my 2022 project? Well, I just finished that project. This weekend, I went away with two friends for a getaway weekend. It was a staycation at my friend's home. It was Joanne. She's our shipper here at Sue Pellin Designs. She also used to be my sewer. She would do all my stitching on the quilts, and I miss her terribly. But she does work in our warehouse and she ships out orders every day. But that means I don't see Joanne every day like I used to when she came to my home here at Sue Pellin Designs headquarters in order to stitch out our patterns. Yay, so happy I finished my temperature quilt. Absolutely. I'm so happy too. So there's a couple of things about the temperature quilt that I want to share with you. I don't know if you can pick it out, but on the edge of the quilt, the very edge of the quilt, the binding of the quilt has a thin blue strip along that binding. That is the flange technique that Debbie Went taught us in the binding class. She talked about that technique and she showed some examples because your binding using the flange technique can be completely sewn by machine. And that's exactly what I did on this quilt. In fact, I taught this technique in the membership as well about a year ago on our gosh, what quilt was that? It was on the tree quilt, the four panels of the tree. I forget the name of the course, but we did our own quilting and we did that project Quilt As You Go. Now, this project was also done Quilt As You Go. I don't have a long arm machine, so that quilt would have been really, really hard to quilt on my domestic machine. So this quilt is actually divided up into four panels. I did each of the seasons individually. So I did spring, winter, summer, and fall, each panel of 3 rows individually. And then I quilted those 3 rows on my domestic machine. That was pretty easy because the maximum width on those was about 24 inches. Then I put them together using Pauline Rogers' Quilt As You Go technique. And then finally in that class, I taught you how to do the flange binding all by machine. So this quilt, the only hand stitching I'm doing on this quilt are when I added my top and my bottom borders. I added those also using Pauline Rogers' technique, but she sews that last seam by machine, and I'm going to sew that by hand on the back of the quilt. So it's like a sashing that goes on the back of the quilt to cover up that seam, and those 2 sashings for the top border and the bottom border, I still have to sew those by hand. So I'm not 100% done with that quilt. Also, I'm going to be creating a label for that quilt that depicts each of the temperatures, and it's my key to what those temperatures mean. Now, I just remembered I also want to put in that key the green fabric from my dad's shirt, so I let people know what that green fabric means. Because if I have a key and there's a fabric that's not on there, people are going to be wondering what that green fabric is all about. It's a green plaid from one of my dad's shirts. So I still need to make a label, a sleeve, because this quilt is going to hang in my quilt show in March at the Thimble Pleasures Quilt Show here in Mendon, Massachusetts. Oh, I'm sorry. It's in Upton, Massachusetts. It's in my hometown. It's at our local technical high school where my 2 boys went to school. So that show is on St. Patrick's Day weekend. That's how you can remember it. So if you're in the area, come down on St. Patrick's Day weekend. We'll be here on Friday setup is Friday. We'll be here on Saturday and Sunday. Now I'll be there both days, but I'm not having a booth at the show. I'm not teaching at this show. I'm going to take this show to be my guild show where I'm just volunteering like every other guild member, setting up the show on Friday, being a white glove hostess on Saturday, and I think selling raffle tickets on Sunday. So this is going to be my guild show where this quilt right here is going to hang. So I'm thrilled to hang this quilt up for the first time on my design wall, and it's hanging beautifully. I was really concerned about wavy borders and that the quilt wasn't going to hang well because it was done Quilt As You Go. Now, quite honestly, I think that this quilt hangs better than most because of that Quilt As You Go technique. Each section of the quilt hangs flat and straight because it's heavily quilted. Then it's cut down to size, and then it's assembled. And I think that method has actually made my quilt hang straighter and more true to size than ever. So I'm super excited about that method. And that method of Quilt As You Go by Pauline Rogers from Australia. I teach that method in the Temperature Quilt course. So this is a course that you could take anytime, and you could start your temperature quilt in June of this year. You can start it in January next year. You can start at any time and do any year on recorded history, because you can go on weatherunderground.com and get the weather history for any year that's been recorded, right? So we don't have every year, but there are many, many years that have been recorded. And you can get that information and do a temperature quilt for your child's year of birth, or for the year you went to high school, or a year that you went into university, or maybe the year that you got married or engaged. So it's a really, really fun project, and one that you could do any time of the year, or you could start a new temperature quilt for the new year. Well, Joanne was also working on her temperature quilt. And if you go on my Facebook page, I did a Facebook Live while we were at our getaway weekend, or we sometimes call it a runaway weekend. I did a Facebook Live because there are two important things I wanted to share with you. Actually, probably three important things. So the first thing was that Penny, my assistant, who is your customer service representative. She is amazing with customer service because she's so much fun. Well, you can imagine how much fun we had with Penny over the weekend. Now, Penny's not a quilter, but she decided that she wanted to learn this technique for rotary cutting your applique shapes, stitching them on the sewing machine, and finishing your quilt by machine. So about 10 years ago, Penny took the Melissa's Quilt Workshop, and she got all of her melons cut and fused and made a beautiful quilt top, even added the borders, but she didn't do any of the blanket stitching. Now that's where that quilt sat for 10 years. So we finally dug out that quilt. Bev says, I love you, Joanne and Penny. That's so cute. Thank you, Bev. You're so sweet. Do I use a hoop when I do the quilting? No, I don't use a hoop. I do use, I'll show you a method using a hoop that makes it a little bit easier, but I've been quilting for a long time, so I don't use a hoop anymore. But when I was learning to quilt, I found it easier to use a hoop system, and I can show you that too. Okay, so Penny wanted to learn how to do the blanket stitching. And so on our Saturday, we had Penny sit down and learn how to blanket stitch. First, because she's so new to sewing, we had her do some straight stitching, pivoting, and just doing lines back and forth on a spare piece of fabric. That was great practice for her for pivoting around the leaves when she was doing blanket stitching. Then we set her up on my brand new Elna machine. Brand new means it's never really been used, even though I've had it for 4 years. I've gotten so comfortable on my old Elna machine that I haven't really used my new one. So I brought the new machine for Penny, and she sat at my fancy Elna, and she did beautiful blanket stitching around those melons on her Melissa's quilt. Then on Sunday, we cut out flowers, leaves, and vines. And although Penny had to leave early on Sunday, we got all of the elements cut out for the borders. And in our next sit down, we will fuse and stitch those borders. So yay, Penny! I'm so proud of you for learning how to applique. After working with Sue Fellen Designs for the past 15 years, I think it's about time, don't you? So I'm really, really proud of Penny. She was really nervous about this, but I think that somebody out there named Bev Henyon inspired her. to be brave enough to be bad at something new. Now, you have seen me take this out over and over and over again. In fact, it doesn't leave my desk right here. Bev picked up these pins for everybody at our retreat, and it is just amazing how that mantra has been such a guiding light for me and for so many of my students. In fact, I am so brave. I'm so brave that I can try all kinds of new things. And if I fail, I don't care. In fact, I am trying to fail 100 times this year in order to try new things every single day. And if I fail, that's okay. It's one step closer to learning what I should do instead of what I did, right? So today is going to be one of those brave, brave days. And guess what? I'm doing it in front of all of you live here on Facebook. I'm going to be very brave and try something new by making a squirrel using my tools. And I haven't tested this out. I haven't tried it. I haven't even really thought about how I'm going to make a squirrel using my tools. But I do have some inspirations, and I will bring you through that process of designing with the tools right along with me. We'll start that in about 10 minutes, okay? And you're going to see me be brave. You're going to see me fail. I'm probably going to fail miserably, but that's okay because it's going to teach me what not to do. And then from that, I'm going to learn what I should do in order to make that squirrel. And it might take me another day to refine this design, but I know that in a week or so, I'm going to have a squirrel for you that's going to be well done versus my first awkward attempt right now. So I'm just looking for my tissues. Hold on just a second. I've got a piece of fabric instead of a tissue, but sorry, my nose is running here. Okay, so we're going to be brave. We're going to try something new. And this weekend, I told you I had 3 things to tell you about that we did this weekend. First thing was Penny learned how to sew. You know what's even more amazing? She has decided, she's taken my inspiration of brave enough to be bad at something new. She's also taken my word of the year, which is focus. And Penny's decided to focus on trying new things so that she can find the things that she likes to do. And maybe she'll become a quilter. Maybe she'll become an artist. Maybe she's going to try a calligraphy class. So she's going to try all these new things and be brave enough to be bad at it so that she can find out what she's good at and what she has a natural affinity for. And I have to say, Penny, you have a natural talent for quilting. It showed this weekend when you did such a beautiful job on your quilt. So imagine that, being a little bit afraid to try something new for 15 years, and then finally saying, enough is enough. What am I afraid of? Let's get this going. Let's get this show on the road. Let's get started quilting. So Penny, I'm so proud of you. Next, we have Joanne. Joanne dove right into our temperature quilt last year. She got off to a great start doing 1 block every day for the whole month of January and February. And then her energy kind of petered out. What happened is Joanne renovated her apartment. It was a total renovation. She had to move upstairs to a different apartment. And so her whole downstairs apartment could be renovated. Her apartment looks out on this beautiful lake that was all frozen. There were people out ice fishing and skating, and it was such a wonderful environment for us to spend our staycation. Well, Joanne was brave enough to try something new last year with the temperature quilt, and then it became a UFO. A PhD, one of those pigs, a project in a grocery sack. She also had run out of fabrics because she wanted a wide variety of fabrics. So on Thursday, before going to Joanne's house, I went through all of my fabrics and I brought over a whole slew of the colors that she needed. And together we helped her cut her squares and her circles for our second temperature quilt. So the first temperature quilt was cherry wood leaves. The second temperature quilt we did as a fundraiser for a, I'm sorry, I'm trying to find the name of the pattern, but we did that as a fundraiser for the orphanage. And that pattern is still available as a fundraiser for the orphanage. So I'm just going to type in on my website, and I'm not going to share my website with you. I'm just going to put it up on my second screen so that I can find it. But how you do that on my website is you go into search the shop, and then you're going to be able to type in one word. So I just put in temperature, and now you can find the Scrappy Happy Circles temperature quilt PDF pattern. So that pattern is a pattern plus. It includes all of the charts and how we're going to figure out our temperatures, and charts to record all of your temperatures, plus the pattern. Now, I did this in combination with Beth Helfter. Beth had made this quilt first, and I asked her for permission to actually write the pattern because she just did it for fun out of her own head. And I wrote the pattern based on the quilt that she made in 2022. So in 2023, this was our fundraiser pattern. It's called Scrappy Happy Circles, and the pattern is $21.95. All of the proceeds from the first 100 patterns that I sell is going to the orphanage. Now, we had a big push last year, and we sent, I think it was $1,900 to the orphanage. Now I want to send more. So if you want to grab the Scrappy Happy temperature quilt pattern, we will still send the proceeds from the first 100 patterns over to the orphanage in Uganda. So Joanne made the Scrappy Happy temperature quilt using circles, and they're all cut out with my Hearts and More template B. They're 2.5-inch circles, and there's 2 different sizes for the squares, so you can make that quilt in 2 different sizes. And all of that is explained in the pattern. Well, Joanne has also decided that when her Scrappy Happy temperature quilt is done, she's also going to use the flange binding because it's such a great way to bind your quilt and not have to sew anything by hand. Okay, I'm also going to encourage Joanne to make a key for her temperature quilt and put that as a label on the back of the quilt. Okay. Next thing I wanted to share with you was during that Facebook Live, I showed you with Penny's help, I showed you how I was quilting the borders for this quilt. Now this quilt has a 5.5-inch border on the top and a 5.5-inch border on the bottom. I quilted that border as one piece 12 inches wide. I designed the border so that I could quilt the whole thing at once, cut it in half, add that quilted piece to the top and the bottom of this pre-quilted quilt, and then I was able to hide those seams on the back with a sashing and make this quilt look like it was quilted on the long arm, even though I quilted it in sections with Quilt As You Go. So I show how I quilted the borders on the Facebook Live. So if you didn't catch the Facebook Live, I want you to go ahead and do that. That will be really fun for you to see Penny stitching on her quilt, to see Joanne making her temperature quilt, and to see me finishing the borders on my temperature quilt. So that's a little recap of our sewing getaway. I hope that you love getting away with your friends for a sewing weekend, or maybe even a week up at Schoodic Institute in Acadia National Park. I'm scheduled to go up to Acadia in 2025. We don't have any plans yet for 2024. But in 2025, we're going to do a Sue Pellin Designs getaway, and I would love to invite all of you to join me. For more information, you're going to write to Bev Henyon, and Bev is right here on the Facebook Live. So go ahead, Bev, put your address in the comments, and we can make sure we get everybody together for a Sue Pellin Designs retreat up at the most beautiful national park over in Maine and we'll keep you informed if we do any other retreats along the way. All right, so changing topics right now, I want to update you on my 6-week intentional action course. So why am I doing a 6-week intentional action course? Because like my little squirrel that we're going to design later, there was a movie called Up, right? Do you remember that? I think it was a Disney, it might have been a Pixar movie that was called Up. And in that movie, they were joking about this little dog that had attention deficit disorder. And he was so distracted by bright, shiny objects or little squirrels running by that it becomes just a joke. When I hear squirrel, I think I am so ADD. I am so easily distracted that when I see a squirrel, I am totally on to a different topic. So it's hard for me to stay on topic even here on our hour-long Facebook Live. But I wanted to update you on my 6-week intentional action course because this course is helping me stay on task. The purpose of this course was to choose 3 goals and to work towards those goals, working with a supportive team of friends in order to reach those goals at the end of 6 weeks. So my goals were 3 of them. One of them was to create my gratitude journal and write 3 things down in my gratitude journal every single day. 3 things that I'm grateful for. And I want you to help me with those 3 things today. I know that I'm grateful for being here with you on Facebook Live and being able to connect this community of applicators who love to applicate, but we also love supporting each other. So I'm going to write that down in my journal because this method of keeping track of those goals is really helpful. So my first gratitude for today is I want to thank you, and I'm grateful for you all being here with me on Facebook Live. Now, there is so many things that I'm grateful for here today. I'm so grateful for Penny and Joanne for spending the weekend with me and motivating me to get my temperature quilt done. So thank you for the motivation and the friendship and the camaraderie for getting things done together, which is so much easier than getting things done alone. Right? So it's motivation and camaraderie that really helps me to be energized and excited about getting something done. And the next thing I'm grateful for is that I have 2 beautiful Elna sewing machines. So I was able to share one with my friend Penny without taking away from the work that I got done over the weekend. We were both able to sew, and I'm so grateful that this business has given me the means to be able to have 2 beautiful sewing machines so that I can set up one for quilting, I can set up one for applique, and I can get a lot more accomplished in a shorter period of time, not having to switch over my machine between different stitches, different threads, and I can be working on 2 projects at once that are on different phases. So I'm just going to say I am so grateful for my sewing machines. And that's how it's done, ladies. Keeping track of what you're accomplishing really helps you to reach those goals. Now, I have another goal, and that's to have a meeting with my Ahead of the Curve members. And when I meet with my Ahead of the Curve members, I just get to know you a little bit better. So we're looking for some volunteers that want to have a one-on-one session with me on Zoom. There's no agenda. It's just to get to know each other a little bit better on a more personal level. And I've had the beautiful chance to meet with so many of our members. I'm looking back at the members' names. I'm trying to do 3 each week. That's my goal. So that at the end of 6 weeks, I'll have 18 members that I've had that personal contact with. So we're slowly going through the membership list and adding people to that list that want to meet with me one-on-one. So here's your invitation. tell Penny if you'd like to have a one-on-one with me, and we'll spend a half an hour on Zoom together, just chatting about quilting and about life and having some fun. So already I've got 3 sessions set up for Wednesday, tomorrow, and that's going to achieve my goal for this week for meeting with my members. Then my last goal is drinking more water, having my water bottle with me at all times, and in combination with that, going to the gym 3 days a week. So you might know that I'm heading out to South Carolina on Thursday to visit some friends. So I went to the gym last night. I had my trainer, Navid, was fabulous at working on skills that will make it easier for me to accomplish the goals that I have in life, right? So I love to bicycle. So I'm trying to keep my strength up all winter long. So then the summertime, I can be right up to speed with bicycling. I'm not going to have that downtime where I'm going to lose the strength and lose my endurance. So I'm keeping up those abilities so that I can have a level health level instead of having my health level going up and down depending on the season. Okay, so I'm going to go tonight. I'm going to work out with Tony, and then tomorrow Tony's filling in for somebody else. So I have 2 workouts with Tony this week. Those are my 3 gym appointments so that I can go away and hang out with my friends in South Carolina. And I'll probably bike while I'm there too. So I might even get ahead of my goals, reach more than 100% of my goals if I work out 4 or 5 times this week. I'm going away with my husband, and he loves to be on the bicycle. So those are my 3 goals, and I am tracking those goals, putting them down on paper so that when we have all of those goals, let me see. I love this course because she has included a chart. I'm not sure I can find it. It's like a little temperature chart. When you go through town and you see a fundraiser that has those little temperature charts like this, so you can fill up your goal and see how close you're getting to your goal. Well, I haven't colored in my charts yet, but I'm ready to start that because that will be a fun way to track my expectations for a successful 6-week intentional action course. Now, if you're interested in something like this for quilting, I am going through this for the first time ever, and I think it's really wonderful. So I would love to run something like this for our members, and we'll put something together to achieve our quilting goals. So remind me of that. We'll be having to think about how to transform that process into quilting goals, but I think it would be really helpful. And if you think it would be helpful for you too, let's tackle that in the membership. Okay, I'm going to change my camera over to my overhead camera because I am ready to be bad at something new. I'm ready to tackle our little squirrel. So just like my 6-week intentional action course, I'm trying this new idea right here in front of you live. And I very well may be very bad at what I'm going to do, but that's okay. By trying, I'm going to be achieving something that I've never tried before. And if at first you don't succeed, try again. I'm not going to worry if this comes out terrible the first time because it's the first step in designing. And I want to say that I'm going to encourage all of you to play with design. It might not come naturally for you, but it certainly is a really fun thing to do. And even if you're really bad at it, you will learn something from it. So I was picking through my scraps to bring all of my colors to Joanne, and I came across these 2 fabrics. These happen to be Tula Pink fabrics, and they're from an old line, and I absolutely love her stylized squirrel. So that is going to be one of my inspiration pieces today. Now, lo and behold, from a different line, and it could even be the same fabric line, just a different colorway, look at this adorable little squirrel. This is also a Tula Pink fabric, and she's got a second squirrel. Now, I don't know if it's from the same line or not. It doesn't matter to me. The squirrel is almost identical. It's almost the same. And look how she's used the feathers on that tail in order to make that tail look all swirly and furry by using a feather design. So let's think about that tail first, because the tail is probably or absolutely the most identifiable section of that squirrel. That's going to, if I can get that basic shape pretty well correct, and I can get his little nose and his little foot correct, I think I'm going to have something that looks like a squirrel, even if it looks nothing like this one right here. So these are my inspiration pieces. I'm going to keep those right here in front of me, and I'm going to work on paper instead of fabric. Now, you could go straight to your fabric if you have fabric that you don't mind messing up and getting rid of. So I do have this great little squirrel color. It's just a calico fabric. It's been around my stash forever. I don't know who it's made by. It's very inexpensive fabric, I believe. It's not one of my better fabrics. So I'm definitely willing to play around with this and to see what I can come up with on fabric. But I think I better do a little bit of drawing first, just to get an idea whether or not, or how, I shouldn't say whether or not, because I am going to make these shapes, but I'm not quite sure exactly how. Now, I do think that the shape of this template B may make a wonderful tail for my little critter here, because I can go around like this, and then I can go down and in, and I think that's a really nice shape for my little guy here. But I also want to have a curve right here on that tail, and if I just move the tool over, that curve is not the right one. I need a much bigger curve. So I'm going to play around with that. All right, let's see if this curve can connect the two. That's not bad. Maybe I can use my my 8-inch tool to make that curve. But I think it would be really nice if that swirl kind of went in, and then maybe I'm going to make this in 2 different pieces and have this one come up like this. Okay, so these are just some ideas for how I can make that squirrel's tail, because I want the tail to basically come up and then curve and go up this way. Now, it can definitely be one piece of fabric, and then I can make this swirl in my tail by using some stitching. And I love what Tula did, using some feathers here in order to make her squirrel look like he had a very swirly, beautiful, feathery tail. So I think that could be really fun to do. And as long as I have the right shape, I don't think I have to worry too much about if that tail is one piece of fabric or multiple pieces of fabric, because I can work with the feather design in order to give it that beautiful little swirl. So I think we're getting off on the right foot here. Now, I really want to play with that squirrel's hindquarter, and I think that we're going to need a bigger tool for that. So let's go ahead and grab our template B. I'm sorry, I our template C or our template D. Now, template C, that seems a little bit big for my squirrel, but maybe not. Maybe that's just about the right size. I think that, yeah, it's probably a little bit too big. So that was the 4-inch circle. And this one right here is my 3-inch circle. So I'm going to just draw that 3-inch circle right here and see if that might be the right size for his little leg. And I think that's probably really good. So again, that's going to kind of be swirly out here. And then I'm going to need a little bit of a foot for my squirrel. Okay, so he's probably going to have some toes that go out this way to hang on to a little branch, but I think just about that idea would be fine. It doesn't have to be too detailed. It just has to have a little round section and maybe a little square section in the back. So I think I'm going to be able to cut the foot of my squirrel using the Hearts and More A, just like this. I think I'm going to be able to use this piece right here and this flat piece right here to be the bottom of his foot. What do we think of that? And maybe that circle needs to come down a little bit more. Maybe we need to bring that circle down a little bit more and get rid of this part so that the foot comes right off of that leg there. Now, we're definitely going to need to have his little head, and his head is probably going to be a little egg shape, maybe with a little point on it. And we all know that we can make this shape using our Hearts and More tools as well. That's just a flower petal shape, right? So I think using the Hearts and More template B, so this is the B, small end, we're going to be able to make a little rounded shape for his face like this, and I'll probably just round up that face just a little bit. So this is looking pretty good. I think that his head looks good, and we'll just make some little ears right here. That's easy to use from little snips of fabric, and we'll probably put them a little bit closer together, even overlapping. And then we need to make the back of his head connect to his tail. And I think this part right here, this is template B, and maybe this part right here for a little belly. Okay, so I know that I can cut this shape with B curve. Okay, and I cut that shape with B curve. Now I need his little arms, and I have no idea how I'm going to make those little arms, but you know what? That's actually not too bad using the Hearts and More template A. Now, I don't think I'm going to use the whole thing, but I want something that looks a bit like that. And then I'll probably make his little paws here, and I'll probably come up and shorten that up like this using that Hearts and More template A again. I don't think I want his arms to be that fat because they've just got those little hands that grip on those little branches. So I'm really going to have to play with those arms and make them just big enough. Now, I might want to squeeze all this together and make his leg a little bit rounder, maybe even use the 4-inch tool for his leg, maybe make his head down a little bit lower and angle this a little bit less here. Bring his head down a little bit, have it poking more out right over his hand, and just shorten this whole thing up a bit and making him leaning over. And of course, we've already learned in our Almost in Baltimore class how to make a little acorn. So we would love to have him holding a little acorn. So there you have it. This is my basic outline for this little squirrel. Now I want to see how he is going to sit on maybe a branch. Okay, so he's going to be sitting on a little branch, climbing up the side of my tree. Here's my tree over here. He's climbing up the side of that tree on a little branch that's sticking out from that tree. And I think that that's not a bad starting point, right? So let's get to the fabric. So how did I make each one of those shapes? I really have no clue. I need to play around with this again. So the tail, I used template B. And I'm actually going to grab my rotating mat, because when I use my Hearts and More tools, I want to be on a rotating mat in order to get around that whole tool without having to stop and reposition my fabric and recut. So let's go ahead and try out this tool. Now, I did this part of the tail right here with template B, but I left this part curved with my my Leaves Galore 8-inch tool. So let me make that curve first. Let me make the curve from the 8-inch tool like this. And then I'm going to come up here and try to find a place where I can make that squirrel tail look like it's nice and big and bushy up at the top, and it comes in round to fit his backside, right? So here we go. Let's try this. So I'm basically keeping this U shape on the bottom from the 8-inch tool. I'm not going to cut that, but I'm going to cut up and around from 90 to 90 here on my Hearts and More tool. So I'm going to take this in little sections and just do this very, very slowly to come up and around here, up and around. Now I'm just going to cut off the excess so that I can get in here and get really close to that 90. All right, so there we go. Here we have the beginnings of a squirrel. Now, I might want to cut this in a little bit and have it a slightly different shape in the end. But let's start off with this shape, and then I can always go back in there and I can trim it with another curve in order to bring that tail down a little bit and angle it into his body. Now, let's go ahead and make that. I'm going to cut a 4-inch circle. I know I started with a 3-inch circle, and then as I was designing on my paper, I thought it was a little bit too small. So I ended up going with more towards a 4-inch circle. And of course, my Hearts and More tools went with me to Joann, and I don't have my 4-inch handy right here. I had it a minute ago. I'm not sure where it went to, but I have this one. It's doubled up. I've doubled up this tool for quilting. So I use this tool with packing tape on it to double up 2 tools together, so it's the right thickness to be a machine quilting template. So I don't want to take these apart because I've already got these together and I have lots of others hanging around my sewing room. So I'm going to use that doubled up one. It's harder to cut with 2, but I think I can do it. So let me just use that one for now. Oh yeah, no problem. Okay. So I've got that little circle going on here. And then I think I'm going to add a separate piece for his foot. So that circle might be a bit big, but what I might want to do is just angle it in this way and maybe cut more of an oval than a circle, or just slim out that circle, cut a little bit more off so it's more tall and skinny rather than round. But I'm going to leave it this way for now. And when you put that together with his tail, maybe that's going to be just fine. So what we want to do now is make his little foot. So I'm going to take my Hearts and More. Now remember, I am brave enough to be bad at something new. I have no idea how this is going to look. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this entire template A. All right. Again, is this my double thickness one? I don't know what I've got here. No, it is my single thickness. So let me just get a piece off of here. And we're going to attempt to cut this template A. Now, template A is the hardest one to cut because it has that sharp inner curve. So once you get around the inner curve, that's the hard part. The outside edge is not as hard to cut. However, it does have that little 1-inch circle that's kind of tough to get around. So if you'd rather trace this and cut it with your scissors, just absolutely feel free to trace this shape and cut it with your scissors. But the basic shape is here. I made a little bit of a mess over there, but that's all right. So let's go ahead and look at our pieces now. So we've got his hind quarter here. We've got his big old tail right here that comes in. And then we've got his little foot. Now, I don't know if that foot is going to be under or on top. I think it's going to be under like this. Yeah, I think that looks good. So I really didn't need the whole piece, but I wanted to cut the whole piece just in case. Now I need his little belly and his little back, but I think I'm going to cut his head first. That way I know where the belly and the back need to go. So let's make, you know what, let me go ahead and I'm going to start working on my, my applique board. That way, once I do get this all together, I can just fuse it in place. Now, remember, I'm cutting just the scrap fabrics, these fabrics that I don't really care about. And I'm using all the same fabrics here. So it's hard to see what I'm doing. So guess what? I am going to switch fabrics so you can see a little bit more of what I'm trying to accomplish here. So let me get a little bit of this brown fabric. And we're just about coming up to 12 o'clock, so bear with me. I'm going to spend a few more minutes making my little squirrel, and then we are going to, I'll perfect this, hopefully, and let you see what I've done on our next Facebook Live. So I'm trying to figure out how to do his little face. And I know that I want to use template A, small end, or template B, small end. So let me just grab template B and see which one I think I was going to use. Let me try template B because I want a little bit longer little nose on him. I don't want it to be too short. So I'm going to go ahead and use template B. And I'm not marking down right now where I'm cutting this. I'm just going to cut it and see because it might not be fat enough. It might not be long enough. But let's see. Not bad. Not bad. Now, I certainly do want to round his nose. I don't want it to be pointy like that. He's going to look more like a mouse than a squirrel. But he does have kind of a pointy nose, but a little bit rounded, and I just rounded that with scissors because I think even the 1-inch tool is going to be rounded a little bit too much. Okay, so we're going to round up that face, and there we go. It might be a little small. I think his face might need to be a little bit bigger, but I'm going to leave that for now because we are running out of time. Now let's make his body. Now, I really have no idea how to do this other than I use the B curve. So let's find our template B once again. And I'm going to use the B curve to make a little bit of a rounded back for him. And then I'm going to use the B curve again to make his belly. Now, once again, I really have no idea what I'm doing. We're going to fail before we get this right, and that's okay. I just cut a piece of fabric here with B here and B here. Now I know that this is going to go under all of the other pieces, so I just really left it big and long and fat. It looks a little bit like a turkey right now. But that's okay. Let's play around with it and see what we need to do. So we definitely want his belly coming right up there to his leg. And then we want his little leg poking out over here. And then we're going to add his little tail. Let's see. And now we want to add his head. All right, so not too bad, not too bad. It still looks like a turkey to me. So I'm not quite sure I've got the shape right for that belly. But I'm going to just cut this right off. and then add his little head right there. And I think the head needs to be bigger. I think definitely the head needs to be bigger. Then we're going to make a little arm just like we made his foot. And that's probably going to be a little bit of playing as well. So far we're okay. I'm not happy with my design just yet because I think that, let me cut this part off. All right. I think we've got the idea for the foot. We've got the idea for the tail. We've got the idea for his head, but the head and the body are not quite right. I think that body's going to need to be a whole lot wider. And then we're going to add his head and his little hands. Maybe the tail's a little bit too long or a little too high. Maybe his hind leg is a little bit too big. So let's start playing with that. I've got my basic outline for my little critter here, and I know it's not quite right, but it's getting there. And that's all I'm going to worry about, is making progress on my little guy. He doesn't have to be perfect the first time, but I want to make progress on this little guy so that I can show you how fun it is to play and create with these ideas. Now, I never get it right the first time, and that's okay, because I am brave enough to try something new and get it wrong and try again to make this little guy the way that he needs to be. I'm going to do one more thing. I'm going to try cutting out his hand using the the Hearts and More template A. Let's just give that a shot before I come back to you briefly to say goodbye on our Facebook Live here. Now, of course, I think his hand is way too big. It's the same size as his foot, but you'll get the idea of what I'm going after when I show you my little squirrel up here. Okay, now I didn't have time to press him, but he's coming along, right? That hind leg is definitely too big. I'm going to go back to the 3-inch hind leg, but he's definitely coming along. I hope that you have had fun designing with me with applique today. I am going to check. The squirrel looks like a success, says Elaine. I love the squirrel fabric. The head looks cute. He's adorable, says Bev. You know what? He's my first try, and we came pretty close. But in order to add this squirrel to my quilt and to your quilts, if you are doing the Almost in Baltimore blocks, I'm going to keep working on this squirrel, and we're going to come up with something that looks absolutely adorable. So I want to encourage you to play. Don't worry about making mistakes. We all make mistakes. That's how we learn. That's how we learn to be a better designer. That's how we get to play together. And then if you're worried about that and you just want to follow instructions, I will get this little critter made. Eventually, he will go into our critter series, which is part of our Ahead of the Curve membership. And then you'll be able to add these little critters to your quilts as well without going through the trial and error process. Now, thank you all for joining me on Facebook Live. Remember that in my gratitude journal, you are there for me today. I love to spend my Tuesday mornings with you creating together. So I'm grateful for all of you and for you being here with me every Tuesday on Sewing in Slippers with Sue. Don't forget that on my website, you can now sign up for demo days. So we're having demo days on February 20th and 21st. If you're not on my email list, go ahead and jump on that email list. I'll send you a free pattern. That's one thing as a bonus, but you'll also get information about demo days and about Applique School every time I run those 2 free programs. Bye, everybody. I hope you have a wonderful day and a creative day of quilting ahead of you. Take care, and I will see you all again next Tuesday. Bye, everyone.